global economy is at a crossroads, fragmented, uncertain, and facing rising tariffs, inflation, and political shifts. From Washington, D.C., the world's top financial minds have gathered for the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank spring meetings, hoping to chart a path through the turbulence. Our correspondent, Nkechi Nana, is on the ground with this report on the tough talk, the policy pivots, and the promises of resilience that are setting the tone on day one. Here is our report.
The mood is somber here in Washington, D.C., as global financial leaders gather under the darkening economic skies. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank spring meetings have kicked off, not with a bang, but with the groan of a world economy under pressure. The IMF boss, Kristalina Georgieva, is urging nations to start adjusting to a fragmented economic future, one stitched together by regional partnerships and economic realism.
My call is, rather than wishing this away, wishing that the world turns back to where it was, we work hard to make the best out of economic relations. But we are in a multipolar world. We are no more in a world where rules can be easily settled.
Next on the agenda, the IMF will unveil its much-anticipated World Economic Outlook. The expectations, growth projections pared back, uncertainty turned up. And the culprit? A cocktail of US-led tariffs, market volatility, and rising geopolitical risk. With President Donald Trump back in the White House, trade tensions are rattling markets like it's 2018 all over again.
Trade tensions are like a pot that was bubbling for a long time and is now boiling over. To a large extent, what we see is the result of an erosion of trust. Trust in the international system and trust between countries.
And for Nigeria, still reeling from tough law reforms under President Bola Tinubu, the IMF admits the government's economic recalibration, scrapping full subsidies, floating the naira, was necessary. But the gains, not yet trickling down to everyday Nigerians. Meanwhile, the World Bank is pushing its new mandate with urgency, and that's jobs. With 1 billion young people entering the workforce in emerging markets, job creation is survival.
And the idea is build a bank that delivers what is demanded, jobs, because jobs is the best way to drive a nail in the coffin of poverty.
So, here's the global dilemma laid bare in DC. Economic fragmentation is the new normal, and the race is on. Not just for growth, but for resilience, relevance, and reinvention. From Lagos to London, Nairobi to New Delhi, Brasilia to Beijing, Cairo to Jakarta, the stakes are high, and the margin for error razor thin. From the IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, Nkechi Nana, Arise News.
Arise correspondent Nkechi Nana there in Washington, D.C., reporting on the spring meeting of the IMF and the World Bank. Well, officially, the theme of this year's conference is about jobs, the path to prosperity. But I guess all the other issues are on the table. As Christina Georgieva was pointing out, about growth, about uncertainty in the world, about the debt burden, and even more importantly, the fact that we have a threat called Donald Trump, who in February introduced what he called a 180-day review of multilateral institutions And the United States is the biggest shareholder of the IMF World Bank. What is the future of the IMF World Bank when Donald Trump ends with his 180-day review of multilateral institutions? So I think this spring meeting, April 21 to 26, it ends on Saturday, and Arise News is on the ground right there in Washington, D.C., covering the proceedings. A lot will depend on what happens with the position of the United States. Will the IMF survive? Will the World Bank survive? Will the United States pull out of these major institutions? They used to call them Bretton Woods institutions. They used to. That's the emphasis. But in any case, we're on the ground. We have an Arise team on the ground that is reporting on these developments. And I see that there is a Nigerian team on the ground, the economic team. I hope they are not there, to attend the circus, because these spring meetings annually, more or less always end up as a circus. I hope that the Nigerian team that is there will be present-minded enough to pay attention to the key issues.
Absolutely. And what are some of the related developments that are happening globally? It's interesting to see that Kenyan President William Ruto has opted to accept a Chinese invitation at the hosting of the Chinese government. He's currently on a trip to China where several economic engagements will be taken, as well as I'm surprised to see that he's going to be speaking at the Peking University as well to discuss Africa's inclusive growth and the fostering of South-South relations. So as much as Dr. Abati says these are formerly Bretton Woods institutions, it's interesting to see those who move against the grain of Bretton Woods institutions. We know that Kenya is an IMF baby, if I may call it that. We know the amount of unrest that some of the proposed IMF reforms have caused throughout Ruto's administration. For him to not highlight the spring, of course, they are spring meetings. We don't expect heads of states to be there. But the timing in that this is when he's in China, and China has paid all expenses to host him. There's a significant shift happening there in geopolitical relations, and this renewed scramble for Africa, if I may call it that.
I'm definitely going to be keeping a good ear on what Ruto has to say in China, because it will be interesting, as you say, to see whether there'll be any more indicators of Kenya. And since he's going to be speaking on behalf of the continent as a whole, to see if any other countries follow suit in terms of a closer relationship with China, and trying to find out or to see what the reality of that type of relationship would mean for us on the ground on this continent, whether that would be more funding or more presence of China in different ways. How much more can we take? How much more space is there? So let us see what he has to say and what the outcomes of that will be. Because
I think this is the issue where, against the background of geopolitical tensions, with the trade war, between the US and China, China has adopted a strategy of looking for new partners. Last week, President Xi Jinping was in Malaysia, Vietnam, and Cambodia. He's trying to lock up the Asian territory. And now he's also looking for partners elsewhere. So President Ruto, going to China is within that, context in terms of response to these geopolitical tensions. But how will America also react? 145% tariff against China, 125% reciprocal tariff from China, and China also threatening that any country that tries to go against the international trading system would, be sanctioned by China. And that's the point that Christy Ilieva was making at that place, that there is an issue with global trade, with the international trading system. But we'll see how it
we'll have to see. Yeah, exactly. We'll have to see how it goes, because as I was saying, China already has trading relationships on the African continent, does already have bilateral trade. So it will be interesting, as you've already listed out, to see what new iterations they will take in the aftermath of this tariff season that we're seeing in the United States.